yeah, that didn't happen. I'm glad I had a really good regular season, because otherwise this would have been a disaster of a year.
Well, plus our petition to start DeAndre Swift at quarterback for our main event team.
Yes,
where we had two quarterbacks, it's just we couldn't start either of them in the playoffs the last 2 weeks. So that was fun.
I'm just, with those playoffs, I'm not going to say anything about this. I'm going to be rah-rah in the playoff challenge and all that when the podcast is live. But,
It's not like we're live or anything.
Oh, sorry.
Which we may or may not be now.
Yes.
All right, guys. We had to press the big red button. Yeah. We'll get into it, guys. We'll get into playoff challenge today. We'll talk about our 2021 season. Dan touched a bit on how the overall feel of the finals. The last 2 weeks were a little painful in some manners, but we'll go through how our seasons went. We've got some guests that just went extremely far in some serious tournaments, so we'll touch on that. For those that are new to the channel, our specialty is high stakes giants, man. Guys who just do it, who've done it, who've slayed the dragons, have brought in the 6-digit winnings, some of the best in the game, and that's what we do on the regular. So we're going to talk about how some of those guys did this season in some of the bigger tournaments. And we'll talk about looking back on 2021, right, guys? Things that we learned, things that we're going to keep doing, things that we're going to stop doing, things that we might change a bit, and then get into some playoff talk like we talked about it. So, guys, I'll shut up and let's get into it.
Goat District, the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text? That trash offers the best? You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden, they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice, from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man, y'all know what to do. It's the... And I always be traded. And I always be traded. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them. Fish.
What is up, Fantasyland? Welcome back to the GOAT District. I'm JD at GOAT District. I have the privilege of doing this on the regular with these three giants. Below me, you've got Andrew AMS Schellenberg, Theo, the OG Fantasy, and beside me, my man Dan at Overhype Sleeper Note E on the end. Dan, we're going to talk 2021 season. You and I teamed up in some leagues. We had a bit of success. The playoffs were a little sour for a couple of weeks. Guys that we invested in or that we thought would bring us to the finish line maybe didn't. Are you still a little sour? Or you over it a bit now?
I mean, yes and no. I mean, it sucks to have such great success in the regular season and then end up in third place in so many weeks, and it bothers me, but on the other hand, I go back and I look and I'm like, these are things I had no control over. This was just literally running bad at the wrong time. And, when you run back at the wrong time, it's just what's going to happen. And I have to take a look at the overall season, how good I did during the overall season, how many teams I brought into position. And, I feel real good about that. Normally, I would have very good results in the playoffs with the teams that I have. And this year it just didn't happen. And that's the way it goes sometimes in fantasy football. So, no big deal. I'll get back on it. Obviously, this year was with the COVID was a little bit different than what we all expected. I mean, this is kind of what we expected to happen last year, and it didn't happen. And so this year, all of a sudden, it was just like, yeah, this is what we're afraid of. So, we are on to 2022, as Toronto Dave says. I'm totally into that. But yeah, we had some great teams though. I mean, JD and I definitely did. We had we took top 2 seeds in the Hard Way Dynasty League, which is an elite dynasty league of is basically by invitation only, and it's some of the best high stakes dynasty players in the world. And then also in the Dynasty Depot League, which is another league of a similar type, also with some of the best high stakes dynasty players in the world. And for us to go into it was season 2 for the Hard Way and season 1 for the Dynasty Depot, and for us to go in there and knock out the 2 top seeds for those, I feel real good about that. I had several other dynasty leagues where I made the playoffs. Again, most of them it was kind of like during the playoffs not so good, but I was still making money on them, so that's the important thing. And and then we had I had a couple 3 main events with Theo and Andrew. 2 of those 3 made the playoffs, and we made money on 2 out of those 3 leagues overall. Between the 3 leagues, we made money even though we didn't make anything in the postseason. And I know these guys have even more good news to me. Not everybody got completely run out of the playoffs like I did, but yeah, let's hear from Theo. What do you got going, Theo?
So yeah, like you, the COVID was a little difficult to deal with. I mean, for pretty much anybody listening, had to deal with it as well. I had a little more hope heading into the last weekend for a few teams, and a few things didn't really go right. It was a very profitable season for me in FFPC. I ended up doing well in Dynasty, and then I had all my 4 out of 5 main event teams did well. Andrew and I had a monster that was somewhere between 15 to 30 for a lot of the season. And we felt very strong heading in. It just, that first week in the playoffs kind of really sunk us.
Every lineup decision went the other way on us.
This is true.
Those are the worst.
We could have done worse if we tried.
Yeah, I am going to point out one positive thing about my situation with getting completely derailed by COVID and injuries. Every one of my lineup decisions was right because there were lineup decisions. It was like, okay, who can start? You're in. Let's see. I need 2 more starters. Okay, waiver wire. Here we come.
Well, you feel good when you scroll down your bench and you see that nobody outscored the guys that you started, on your bench. You're like, okay, well, at least I couldn't have done anything else, when it comes to the starting lineup.
Exactly.
Sorry for interrupting, Theo.
All right. No.
Go, Theo.
So, I was very pleased with the season. I think that we had pretty good process in our preseason takes on the GOAT District. This was actually my first year where I did well in the FFPC and then not so well in the NFFC. So I think that next year I'm really looking to rebound big time in the NFFC. Had a couple teams that were unlucky, and then a couple of teams where I drafted guys like Allen Robinson, and it was just bad from the start. So I feel good about my process. I'm actually really excited for 2022 already. I'm doing some of these renewing some of these dynasty teams and feeling really good about the way they're looking. And just trying to think about my 2022 rankings, trying to do that mental exercise. So I'm stoked. I feel like, every year you kind of get a little more seasoned in things and a little more hardened towards, maybe not reacting to the, things when they're going poorly or not getting too hyped when they're going well. And I think that, next year I'll have an even better process. So hopefully next year the COVID stuff is out of the equation. I think that would help all fantasy players. Like Dan said, it was rough. It was really rough. The Travis Kelce going for 44 points and then missing the following week was about as bad as it gets. I had one team that I felt was going to make an extreme run, and then to lose him and not get anything out of him in week 2 of the playoffs was just insane. So I'm really hoping that's kind of like my hope for all fantasy football players is we don't have to deal with this nonsense next year. What about you, Andrew?
Yeah, no, some of my best teams flamed out, or at least my favorite teams. Best teams, favorite teams. Some of my favorite teams flamed out, and I got absolutely no return for them. I had one team with a Devontae Adams, Deebo Samuel, and Jamar Chase, and like totally missed out on all playoffs. Like,
Wow.
who does that happen to? Anybody but me.
Was that your auction team, Andrew?
Oh, well, no, but close enough. That was another one of my favorites.
Your auction team was badass.
Badass. You kicked it out. Like, first of all, it ran so hot the first 6 weeks, and just like for whatever, you weren't talking about bad lineup decisions. Like, they weren't even bad. Like, I'd pick put Chase in the lineup, and he'd do bad, but Devonta Smith would do great on the bench. Like, it was just like a mess in the middle of the season. And Dan, you mentioned it to me after that week because I thought the same thing you did. You said, "Sorry, you're out." Like, I thought that you were in either way, and I had done the math in it, and basically it was like, as long as I didn't put up a 0 and this one guy didn't put up a whatever, I was in. And I guess a 4, like his victory points. So I think he won and somehow was the top 4 score, even though like he hadn't done that well. Anyway, long story stupid, got knocked out with my favorite team. And then, of course, that team puts up a monster week last week.
Never fails, eh? The week
I didn't go back enough to see whether it would have actually like run pure in the playoffs, but was like absolutely one of my favorite teams. But I will tell you, there was a lot of pride this year. Revelations, and I'll stick on this one just because it involves you guys as well for allowing me to do some of the Millie Billies, right? The first podcast that we did on the channel was with Todd from PA, Best Ball NFL Now, and we reviewed the Revelations draft. And it was a funny draft because, I did prepare remarks unlike basically every other time I did this. But I opened with the Twitter reviews of that team that I drafted, and it got flamed on Twitter. People roasting it. It was like, hey, if I didn't look at the teams or before the draft, you'd have a 1 in 12 shot. Have you ever played FFPC before? It was so good. And I didn't care. That stuff doesn't bother me. But like the receipts on that team, so good. Ended up taking down Revelations. Although I will tell you that I almost puked all over the place last night on the Najee Harris run. I think I needed to fade him for like 30-point-something points, and that last run put it within a point. So I think Revelations was a lot of fun this year. Did really well in main events. And I'll just say I don't know if we're in the New Year's resolutions spot yet, but I actually had a lot of fun in the KFFSC, the Kentucky stuff. So I think I'll actually play a little bit more of those this year. Slightly lower stakes in the FFPC. Still a lot of fun. 3 wide receivers and good group of guys over there as well. Just to give a shout out to another brand of fantasy football.
Nice. So overall, I mean, pretty good seasons. Dan, you talked about our 2 500 teams. I mean, I couldn't ask for more other than crushing the finals. Would have been nice, obviously. But like you said, top 2 finishes, you get cash for that, and then we finish in third in both leagues. I had another team, dynasty team. I play with Shane Manila and our buddy Eric, the Shiva, which I was first place the entire season. And what did I finish? Second place in the finals. And then, as my hat says right here, another tournament. This is the Canadian National Best Ball League. Shout out to our buddy Will Harris from Viridian, who organizes that. Again, leading the entire season, and I finished second by a handful of points. And that thing had a big ass, beautiful trophy that I had a spot for right behind me. So I'll have to try to get that again next year. And then NFFC, I told you guys I had a team in the top 20. I finished 17th. That's new to me. I only did a couple of teams, so that's something I might put more time into next year. I won 4 FFPC, $35. I won a 125. The tourney, I won the league, made it to the first round, then lost. Won a couple of the $5 best balls. Underdog, I did see a big improvement because last year I just sucked on Underdog. This year I got about 60% of my buy-ins back, which I'll take because I didn't play any really big buy-ins, but I played good volumes on smaller ones and some of the bigger tournaments, so I cashed a bit in those. But overall, I mean, Dynasty, I did really well this year. Had 5 finals going, just like Dan talked about, ran dry and only 3-peated in the DPL, the Dynasty Premier League, which is Matt Hicks's Premier League. 3 years in a row, I win the Tier 1 championship there. Otherwise, yeah, man, I get them to the finals, and I don't know what it is. I just can't make it happen in the finals. But you know what? All in all, a good season. Like I told Dan earlier, if I can cover most of my buy-ins going into the following season, that's a win for me. And, you know, it gives me another chance the next year. This year, I want to focus more with you guys at some of these more big tournament redraft leagues. I've already cashed in some of my winnings for some football guy entries that I'm hoping to, you know, to increase this year. And just keep playing the best balls, man. I find as long as I keep getting better at best ball and I'm winning more best ball leagues every season, I think I'm getting better, and it shows in my dynasty and my other leagues as well. All right, guys, let's talk about 2021. We flexed our results, our portfolios. You know, again, we're not just here to talk the talk. We're not doing this to just flex, but we're here to walk, and you know, to show that we do it out there on the field as well, right? Sorry.
Real quick, we got to flex for the Goat District show itself.
Oh, yes. Before we do that, very well, Dan, take it, man. You got this one.
All right, so. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about who was on the GOAT District this year. One of the things that we've really committed to doing this year is trying to bring you the best guests that we possibly can. You know, as we're talking about, you know, some of the brightest minds in the fantasy football industry, and some of the biggest players, some of the heaviest hitters. You know, guys that just go out there and they're out there walking the walk. They're out there, you know, actually making money at this. And we had quite a run. I'm only going to mention a few of the guys, but we had on this year Billy Wazowski. I think we had him on twice, right, Theo?
He's been on twice. Yep,
twice this past year, and he won the RotoWire Online Challenge, the NFFC RotoWire Online Challenge, with a cool $200,000 prize. Matt Modica.
I'll give him an air horn for that one.
Yeah, no doubt. Who was on this fall, got 4th place and 5th place in the NFFC primetime. That's pretty special, getting 2 in the top 10, 2 in the top 5 even. Chris Picaro was on this fall. He got 9th in the primetime.
He got what? Sorry, you cut out there, Dan.
Oh, he got 9th place in the primetime.
Top 10, nice.
Yep. So we have one person with the top in the OC and 3 of the top 10 in the prime time. We also had Biplab Mandal, 7th place in the FFPC main and 11th place in the Football Guys Championship.
Nice, split coin.
Yeah, and then Austin Martin got 10th in the FFPC main, and both of those guys play in some of our dynasty leagues as well. So I mean, you know, the guests that we've had on this year have been fantastic. You know, I've learned more about I thought I knew a lot about high stakes fantasy football, and I think I did, but I learned a lot more this year than I ever knew before, just by being able to soak in what these guys are saying, you know, for an hour and a half, once a week. I mean, it's just been fantastic. For those of you guys who've been along for the ride for most or all of these, I really hope that you've gotten as much out of it as I have, because I mean, it's just, I'm like excited to, you know, put on the headphones and flip on the mic every Tuesday night and do this because of the great guests that we get to talk to.
Yeah, it was a tremendous success. It was great seeing these guys do well. And I'll also add that Chris Picaro also finished 9th in the Classic. And he splits that team with a family member, Joseph DeGalbo. But that was a live draft in New York, where I was in that one, and he had it was one of the hardest drafts there. It was Glenn Lowy was in there, Nelson Sousa was in there. It was just a murderer's row, and Chris finished top 10 in 2 of them. So it's great to see these guys doing well. Like Dan said, I mean, I think that I don't think any other podcast brought on our level of players consistently. You know, we're very thankful of how open and honest they were with their processes. You know, we also had Abib Agbato on twice.
In the cloud chase with the ship chasers, we reviewed one of their teams in the Half Milli Billies. Now that team of theirs did go 1-11 in that league, but I do think Peter Overzet ended up doing really well.
And you just wanted to point that out
in the BBM too. I think he did do like top 10 there too. So
yeah,
we'll still a little clout that way. And again, as JD mentioned, they went 1-11 in that league. So
So what we're saying is we'll put up our guests winning bankroll versus any other podcast's guests winnings any day.
Any
day. Yeah, and we haven't even mentioned like Nelson. We just briefly mentioned he was all over the leaderboards of several different tournaments. Chad Schrader also all over the leaderboards of like every tournament that's possible.
Billy Muzio and Todd were at the top for the 100K.
Oh yeah, Billy.
Tailgates.
Billy finished what, third?
Third.
Shout out to Muzio. That guy puts in a lot of work. It's nice to see guys like that do well, you know?
No, absolutely. So, I mean, I can't wait for as we get, closer to draft season, we'll continue to bring guys back on the show, and then we'll bring on a lot of new guests who have had success here. It's kind of a fantasy football. We've had these conversations kind of off air. It's kind of a funny thing. When you get into high stakes fantasy football, it's almost like poker, where you have the World Series poker and you have these big names in poker who you know who they are, where in fantasy football, a lot of the best players maybe are not as known as some of these analysts. That's not to say that we don't love great analysts. We've also had great ones on this year as well. But I think we provided a place where we're shining a spotlight on some of the best players in the country, and they've been very generous and gracious, and it's just great to see them, do well. It's not great to be in a league and with some of these guys and lose to them, but it's great to see them, cash out and do well. And they're all really good guys. And especially big shout out to Billy Wazowski winning that overall. That's huge. He's already in the NFFC Hall of Fame, and this is just another big time accomplishment.
And I mean, I look behind me. I've got a big, thick book. If anyone knows Tim Ferriss, he's a guy that teaches, mastery and Titans and how to get really good at stuff. And it's only one way, guys. You learn from the best, right? And you want to be the best. You want to get really good at something, master it. You want to put in the hours, the 10,000 hour rule, and you want to surround yourself with good sources. And that's what we're trying to provide you guys, is just the information, teach you guys how to fish, that whole strategy. When we talk players and that sort of thing, guys we're buying, it's more just follow the logic. Try to follow the logic, the patterns that you're seeing between us and our guests, because you'll see repetitiveness in those patterns, and then you start to learn on your own. And that's what we're trying to provide, guys. So Dan, do you want to, you're kind of riled up. Do you want to kind of keep going, and do you want to take on some of these 2021 FFPC winning rosters in builds, or do you guys want to get into, kind of things that we've noticed and that kind of thing? What do you want to do, Dan? I'll let you steer the ship here.
All right. Yeah. Let's just quickly take a look, since we kind of teased it.
Very interesting.
I just put together a little.
Can we get that bigger a bit, Dan? Maybe zoom in the website.
Yeah, hang on.
Just so you guys can see, so basically what Dan's done, Dan's put together some research on the winning rosters, some winning stats on some of these winning teams that have taken down some of these big tournaments, straight from our buddy Fantasy Mojo. Shout out to Darren, and some other data that Dan's able to pull somehow that I have no idea how, but he's
shout out to Dan, who is easily the best Excel guy on high stakes fantasy players. It's not even close. Another beautiful Excel sheet.
Yes, I love it.
I'm gonna defer to Mike Sanda at least on that.
Mike Sanda is definitely up. You and Mike Sanda are in like the Mount Rushmore of Excel.
One thing you can expect when you draft a team with Dan is he will send you an email with a spreadsheet ahead of the draft with some information that is gonna give you that little edge over your opponents, and it's awesome. You're like, man, I teamed up with the right guy.
There you go. Yep. So anyway, I just kind of wanted to go through, and this is what we're looking at here. Is we're looking at the FFPC main event, the top 20 teams that cashed, and what we're looking at is just kind of what I want to start looking at is the style. That's how I have it sorted right now.
So what do you mean by style, Dan?
By style, I mean like what was their draft strategy? Did they go balanced? Did they do hero RB, running back by, two running backs in a row to start? How did they put it together? And, one of the things you're going to see here is that, by far the biggest ones were the hero RBs. We had 7 out of the top 20 used the hero RB strategy, and 7 more out of the top 20 used the RB times 2 strategy. So they're starting off with, 2 running backs as kind of the anchors of their build. So, kind of what that shows you is, that running backs are very important in the FFPC, because then you had 3 more that were robust RB, and then 1 that was balanced. You only had 2 0 RB teams out of the top 20. And then both of those were kind of more towards the bottom. That was the number 16 and the number 19 team. So I think the FFPC kind of lends itself to a little bit heavier of a running back build. And what you can see too is, and I'll post this on Twitter, where people can kind of take a look at it and hack into it a little bit more. But I took a look at basically like RB1. That's what round was their first running back taken in. Quarterback 1, what round was their first quarterback taken in? Tight end 1, what round was their first tight end taken in? And then wide receiver 5, rather than look at where their wide receiver 1 was taken. I thought it was more instructive to say, how quick did they get down, and get 5 wide receivers on their roster? Yes, and I knew that Andrew would very much enjoy that. So, but you can see, that most of these teams were with their wide receiver 5s. They had them in by around 10 to 12. There were a couple teams that went past that. There were a couple teams I couldn't really look at because they were live drafted. And so, of course, there's no draft board listed. In
live, you mean in Vegas, not in live. Vegas, okay. Yep.
Yeah. So there's live in Vegas. And then there was, a couple of them I was able to kind of get a little bit more of an idea of. I just kind of looked at what their week 1 starting lineup was to figure out, roughly what they did.
Yep.
But there were a couple of them that you just couldn't really tell, exactly what was going on with them. But so anyway, that gives you an idea of what people were doing in the FFPC. In the main event, it was a lot more of, people doing heavier on running back, or at least getting that hero running back in. Very, very little of the 0 RB.
And that's consistent, Dan, even with, like, if I look at, obviously for the show today, going through my winning best ball rosters, especially on the FFPC, very consistent with those builds, the hero RB, and even teams like I look at one of my leagues that I won 35 best ball, or it might have even been the 125. Derrick Henry was my first pick, but because of the build and because I'm able to get guys like Elijah Mitchell later on, Leonard Fournette, it doesn't kill your team, man, if you lose that first rounder, if you're building it right. And I think it's very consistent. I think best ball and what you're talking about with these redraft rosters.
Right, exactly. Oh, and then I was just going to go back and look at, draft position. If we go back and sort by draft position, most of these teams were drafted in the back half of the draft. There's a lot of, 8, 9, 10, 12 teams in there. And
which is interesting, then, because when you think about hero RB, you always think about those early spots where you can grab the RB and then kind of hammer the receiver, right? And now you're saying it's the opposite. It's very interesting.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, especially with the 12s, Dan. Like, look at those 12s who are all robust or RB2 or RB times 2, like right in a row there. Yeah.
Right. And I think, and that goes back to the point JD was making too. Like, if you look at the hero RBs, those tended to be more early in the draft. And then the robust and the RB times 2, the robust was kind of, or RB times 2 was kind of all over the map. But the robust RB were definitely, all 3 of them were from the 12 spot.
Yeah. They're the ones who had that access to that round 3 or round 4 Cooper Cup.
Yes.
Well, again, exactly. I don't know. You didn't list that, but the only question I have, Dan, and again, this is great research. So nothing against the research, and I certainly don't have time to do anything further than to just throw this out in the universe. You ever see the statistics? And I'm not going to explain this correctly, where they're like, "Hey, this is the Super Bowl roster. Here's all 53 players, right?" And they're like, "Oh, look at them. Out of the 53, 30 are 5 stars." 20 or 4 stars and 10 or 3 stars or no stars. And everyone's like, see, you can still be a 3-star and make the Super Bowl. But the point is that like if you look at the pool of 5 stars that make the NFL, or
Yep.
you know what I mean? Like if you look at it, so I'm wondering if there's anything to it where, yes, so many as a not a zealot quite yet, but as somebody who likes like heavy wide receiver builds, I'm wondering aloud, do we see so many robust running backs or RB times 2 because those are just more prevalent in the field to begin with, and it just so happens there aren't that many like zero RB zealots? And that's the question. Again, I'm asking that as somebody who probably won't do any further research other than the great.
I think like if I'm setting a lineup, I'll be a little more robust RB. But I think if I'm playing best ball, I way rather play either more of that hero RB and just get depth in numbers at the RB position, but get those receivers early.
Yeah.
Yep. So a couple thoughts on that. I think you can kind of lump the hero RB in with the zero RB. They're not exactly the same.
Yeah.
But the hero RBs tended to be very heavy on the wide receivers.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you look at the hero RBs and you see that their wide receiver 5s were taken, nobody went later than round 12, but 8, 7, 10, 10. That's where those wide receivers were taken. And
what about tight ends, Dan? What about tight ends?
Tight ends, you can see with the tight ends, and especially in the FFPC main, Mark Andrews was the smash play. Yeah. It was just like it was Andrews or bust. Most of those round 4 and 5 that you see are going to be Mark Andrews. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot of Andrews in there. There was a lot of Kupp, a lot of Deebo Samuel. And we're talking about the doubling up on running back at the 12. Where you're getting the 12th and 13th pick. And you were seeing a lot of Austin Eckler. Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah. Najee Harris.
So there were just, it was easy to smash 2 great running backs back there. Whereas the front half of the draft was where a lot of the running backs failed us. And the teams that did best, I think, on the hero RBs were actually the ones who took their RB in the second round or maybe even third round.
Yeah, Mixon was definitely lagging in that second there.
Right.
I think one other interesting thing to look at year in, year out, and it's something that, obviously injuries play a factor into it, but the hit rates for draft position. So like Dan pointed out, the end of the first round was pretty advantageous for a lot of players. You don't see the number 1 on any of these teams. Obviously that would have been a McCaffrey team for draft position. And then a lot of the teams that went that had the number 2 overall pick, Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's a Kelsey team. I see your notes.
That's a Kelsey team. Yep.
So it's interesting. We start looking back at the hit rates of players, and Travis Kelsey, where he didn't have this massive smash season like a lot of people would have liked to have seen from him. He still was productive and wasn't the landmine that some of these other top early picks were. So it's very interesting to go back. It's always a hindsight 2020 type thing, but to see what draft positions really hit. I think Billy, I know it's obviously a different format, but I think Billy Wazowski was drafting like 7th or 8th, and Danny Mueller was 7th or 8th as well, just because I was following that OC. So, we always, when we go into the summer, we always get excited about getting a certain spot, whereas it's almost more you want to avoid landmines at the top. And it's just in the back of the draft, especially in the first round, that's where the value drops, right? You're usually taking whoever drops. And if you think about that time of period where JT was falling in the back end of the first, and even sometimes into the second, I'm sure if we dive deep into some of these rosters, we're going to see JT in some of those spots.
Yep. Yeah. JT was often in the second round. He was in some of these RB times 2 or robust RBs, that were taken, the 9th draft position or later. Commonly JT was that second running back. Mm-hmm. Even more so in the football guys, just because people were more scared of him because you got to win your tournament. You got to win your league tournament to win any money in the football guys. Whereas in the main event, you're going to if you're one of the top two teams, you're getting, $2,000 for sure. So there's no real, there's a lot less urgency about making sure you win that tournament. You just want to finish top two. And JT definitely helped people do that. So he went a little bit higher in the main than the football guys. The other thing I wanted to hit real quick was the main event. Of course, you've got three different kinds of drafts you can do. You can do fast online drafts, you can do slow online drafts, and you can do Vegas drafts, right? And I know that Theo and I had been talking back and forth about how many, look at how many teams came from online drafts, but when you look at it, 73.5% of the teams in the entire contest came from fast online drafts. 11.2% came from slow online drafts, and only 15.2% came from Vegas drafts. So, at first I was thinking, there might be an advantage to drafting online, but after looking at this, again, small sample size, but the live drafts were pretty well represented here. So,
do you think our thing that I was mentioning? This is it.
But do you guys think that, just thinking about that, how do we play off of that? Do you think, Dan, that it's because in a live draft you have a higher chance of getting an advantage, whereas in a slow draft everybody can take their time, they can do their research between picks, they can go check out whatever the chip chasing guys, the Millie Billy guys are doing. Whereas when you're doing the live drafts, like the guys who have done the most drafts at that point doing that live draft are probably the ones that are going to draft the best rosters. Do you think that has a play, or what do you think the reason is for that, Dan?
It's hard to say. I mean, I think it'd be interesting to go back and, do a bell curve of the scores from all 12 teams in each of the slow drafts versus what they were in the fast drafts, to see if there's, if the teams are just more tightly bunched together in those slow drafts because everybody had a little bit more time to kind of think about their picks. And, thus it was harder to gain an advantage. But, that's more than I'm willing to speculate on right now.
And I think that was a great point by Dave in the chat about how quick decisions sometimes are better decisions. I will say that I love doing slow drafts. I actually think people galaxy brain it more in slow drafts.
Because they overthink it? You think they overthink it?
Like you said, they overthink it, and they go and they try to make the perfect draft for themselves, and they end up screwing it up. I've had, some of my better teams might be slow drafted teams. I just think that it's a great way to draft. I enjoy it, and also I think that people think that they're going to get the perfect draft because they have more time. It doesn't necessarily mean anything. And I think that it's interesting to look at this live versus online. I think that if you're drafting often, you should try to do both. If you're going to New York or you're going to Vegas, you got to warm up with the online drafts. And I don't think there's necessarily a direct correlation between doing a football guys draft to get yourself ready for a main event. I think a main event you should try to get a main in before Vegas. I wish I would have done that this year. Maybe get started a little bit earlier with my higher stakes draft. I think for me they were a little bit backloaded, which has its advantages and disadvantages. But it's a great research by Dan. It's a great debate.
Yeah.
But it's just fun to go back and look and see where the money actually happened. And I think we can kind of delve into it a little more.
It's probably a weird mix, right? Because mains start in July, so it's probably ADP is probably a little sharp by then. The people who are jumping in July are the Sharks because they want to be in. So you probably have pretty good ADP by July. The people who are doing them that early are good anyways, and maybe it's a little bit tighter there. Whereas in Vegas, I'll tell you, not like everybody I sat at tables with, but I think that there was a few new people who hadn't done an FFPC main event draft. Now, the guys who did it with, I like them a lot, and they actually, I think that they placed and made the championship. I'm just saying that maybe that's what's happening a little bit here is we're seeing by the time you get to Vegas, other people are just jumping in wanting just to go to Vegas with some buddies, because I know that's where I was a couple years ago. So I know how that goes, and so I wonder if there's a little bit of that where the pool deepens a little bit that late in the drafting season in September.
Yeah, Vegas, you could also run into people that are maybe a little having a little too much fun at the draft table, who've enjoyed their day before the draft starts, and that can also be an advantage to you.
That's why you booked a later time slot. You don't do that morning one. Where
everyone
in the morning went to the gym. They they did they've been stretching all morning. Whereas the later ones, they're like, fuck this, I'm in Vegas, I want to party.
Yeah,
that's it, man.
And running into Lance in Vegas is always a treat. That guy is he's a wild man at the draft table. Just real quick, I just want to throw on the football guys one too, just to point out a couple quick things on here, because I know Andrew will be very happy that I'm gonna move it like that. I know it makes it a little bit smaller, but we had one wide receiver times 4 start, and then we had 3 0 running back starts in the football guys that cashed, and several other hero RBs. It was a little bit less tilted towards the RB2, RB3, or robust RB. People tend to be either balanced or more towards hero or 0 RB. So you tended to see a lot more of that, and and actually the champion and the second place winner, the champion was a hero RB, the second place winner was a balanced team. So again, kind of the same sort of lessons that you saw from the main event, but you saw the one thing I saw was that there were some teams that did some things that you would kind of classify as a donkey move in this thing, like they took there's one team that took their first wide receiver in round 5, 2 tight ends and 2 quarterbacks before their wide receiver 4 got drafted. And you're going, oh, okay.
They would have won the rake if we had done a live draft. Steve and I probably would have looked at the team and called them the rake.
Yes, exactly.
And then here they go winning 13 times more than I did.
You can't handle the truth.
I think it also, sometimes and we're getting super deep on how these teams can win, but like Cooper Kupp this year has 412 points. So if you simply just draft Cooper Kupp, just to put it in perspective, Cooper Kupp is wide receiver 1 overall right now. You could take wide receiver 12, which is Mike Evans, and wide receiver 20, which is T. Higgins, add them up cumulatively, and Cooper Kupp is right there with him. So he was like having it's almost like having 2 starters at once. So if you just hit on one of these mega producers, it doesn't really matter how your structure is. Like we've said a couple times, I mean, any draft strategy works if you draft the right players.
Theo, you mean like my 3-peat team that has Kelsey, Cooper Kupp, JT, Debo? Do I need to keep going?
Exactly, JT. That's the greatest team in America and Canada. The team that JT put together.
Where's my air horn? Fucking, that deserves one. There you go. Oh, you got
American champs,
you got the tail.
Yeah. So,
all right.
So the one thing I want to say on that is, what's Theo's exactly right. Drafting the right players matters a lot more than anything else, because what the common thread through all of these 40 teams that I've looked through is that they drafted the right players. There's a lot of Cooper Kupp, there's a lot of Deebo Samuel, there's a lot of Mark Andrews. You're seeing the same players over and over and over again. I think what the difference was that you tended to see more of them on the teams that were structurally drafted well, because you give yourself more chances at hitting players. Yeah, exactly. So, if you're not overdrafting running backs in the first few rounds, or call it through the first 5 or 6 rounds, either if you draft a lot of running backs there, you got to hit on some. And we saw some teams that did that, that went running back times 3 or running back times 2 or even more than that. And they hit on those running backs, but the thing is they also hit some wide receivers in there, which was tough to do. They took kind of the path where you have to thread the needle a little bit more. They had to be right kind of a lot more.
You got to hit Waddle later on. You got to, you got to get those Elijah Moore weeks in there.
Yeah. And it was kind of funny too, because, there were a couple teams in there that looked, I was like, man, this draft is structurally perfect. And it's like, but man, some of these players just bombed, and it was like, they had AJ Brown, they had Juju, and players like that, Allen Robinson. And you're like, man, they took a lot of hits. They had some really bad players early on in the draft. Because they did such a good job of drafting structurally, they still were able to pull it out and get themselves into the top 20.
And I think one big part of that, Dan, and that's one of the things that I wanted to bring up in our next segment, maybe we'll segue it, maybe not, but I think that hitting the right players, but also building your team structurally also talks about timing throughout the season. Like you gotta combine the right players that are going to complement each other throughout the season, as opposed to like your whole running back core, in the first 3-4 weeks are gone, and then you got nothing on the back end or whatever. You got to be able to put the puzzle together so that your team is producing the whole season. And I think that as I look through my teams that have won leagues, that's one thing that, is important, is the timing. When do you expect this guy to give you his production in the season?
Yep. Yeah, that's a great point.
All right. So talking about that, guys, like Kyle said, smash the like, guys. Hopefully you guys are getting a lot from this. I know Dan put a lot of research in it. We appreciate all the goodness. Shout out to Fantasy Mojo, who helped Dan put some of this data together. And guys, think about this stuff as you build these teams. Where the drafts are coming now. I don't know if we have finals left. Is there any finals left anywhere? I don't think so. We've got the playoff challenge coming up.
If your league has finals this week, then you should probably be finding a new league.
Find another league. Join myffpc.com. Make sure you shout out to us first, and we'll hook you up with some bonuses. But you should probably be in a different league. That's for sure. Agreed. But guys, smash the like, smash the subscribe. That's the way to help the show. I got the GOAT gear on. Whether it's a hat, t-shirt, sweatshirt, hoodie, go check out the GOAT gear. Support the show, guys. We're helping you guys win. You've probably won some championships if you followed us all off season. Dan, Theo, and Andrew have talked about the amazing guests that we've had on this year and how much they've brought down. There's a reason we're talking to you guys about this. Go back, check out the episodes. That's the other thing I want to say, guys. If you go back and look at these high-stakes, successful players, these high-end analysts, and you can go back 2-3 months, I guarantee you'll get value that'll bring you that still applies as you go into this offseason. Helps you manage your teams. We've asked them about how they manage their teams, what they're doing in the off seasons to get better, how many best balls are doing, all that kind of thing. So make sure you tune in, make sure you subscribe. We're going to keep bringing the goodness, guys. Let's do a quick 2021 review, lessons learned, players, that we want to be buying more of, that kind of thing. And then we'll get into some playoff talk. But guys, it's look, New Year's, right? Theo, New Year's resolution. Now's the time. Why don't you start it off, brother? This is kind of your segment. So why don't you take the first one? What's your biggest lesson learned, buddy?
So for me, the biggest lesson learned was Deebo Samuel. I think that's the guy where he averaged 20.7 points per game, and he had such a smash start, and it was very consistent points with some big smash weeks in there. He was able to offer you rushing touchdowns. They totally pivoted his role, but he was just such a weapon. But I think that if I could go back and kind of, re-aim my process, especially in redraft, he was, everybody talks about Cooper Kupp. I think Cooper Kupp and Jonathan Taylor are the fantasy MVPs. But Deebo Samuel just gave you such a leg up based on when he was drafted. And I think for me it was, we talked about this with a few guests on the show, where if a guy flashes year one, then maybe takes a step back year two, I think that year three you have to go and look at the fact that he has hit, and really kind of accentuate the positives more on these high draft capital guys, with the same coaching staff, where I've talked about Chase Claypool might be a target of mine this coming season, where that might be something where people are completely off the guy. But
I've got him and Juju. Him and Juju are on my list as targets. And you know what? I think, Theo, that you can extend that. And I don't know. I don't think that you can limit that. You have to limit that to first or second year guys. I think that guys who have done it, and we've mentioned this many times on this show, guys who have done it before, Dan, I'll go to you with questions, and you're like, if this guy hasn't proved it to me yet, he needs to prove it to me first. If guys that have done it before, top 12 finishes, and they lose value, you need to jump on that. I think you can extend that to guys that are in third, fourth year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that youth is definitely something like a factor. Like, I don't want to do that with like a really old guy, but yeah, certainly like a 24, 25-year-old. But to me, it's Deebo Samuel. I've drafted some Cooper Kupp, and I drafted some Deebo Samuel, but I should have had a lot more Deebo Samuel. I think that's something where it was a combination of talent, opportunity, and in a situation where the coaching staff loved him. Was he helped out by the fact that George Kittle went down relatively early? I think he definitely was. But I think that the role was looking strong even before that. And I think that with regards to Deebo as well, I think that when you have, two wide receivers that are, one is slightly ahead of the other, you need to kind of take a step back and say why. I think for a lot of situations, it's very clear why a guy should be going, ahead of his teammate. But I think in the Brandon Ayuk versus Deebo Samuel conversation, Deebo should have been screaming out that Deebo was the, much better value. Whereas I think there would have been a lot of sharp players that were certainly on Ayuk. So for me, Deebo was the lesson learned. I don't want to miss a Deebo Samuel ever again. I think my process will be trying to focus in on trying to find those wide receivers that are the tremendous values, and it certainly is Deebo Samuel.
So is the lesson there, like, maybe while people are excited about the new shiny toy in the Ayuk, maybe you're trying to find the value in the situation? What exactly is the lesson that you learned with the Deebo Samuel situation?
I think it was more of my main lesson would be flashing. Well, to keep it real simple, would be a guy flashing year one, taking a step back year two. I want to invest in that play.
Take advantage in that value in his price drop, basically.
It was basically like a dynasty,
showing it.
Almost like a dynasty thought process in redraft.
Dave's just killing the chat. Shout out to Toronto Dave, just killing the chat.
I think
Toronto Dave is the chat at this point.
He is the chat at this point. I love it.
He's all I see. He's running around my head. No, I mean, I think the tough thing, right, Theo, again, not for you to be traumatized or to kick yourself, is what I like this year to piggyback off of that is smart coaches using their best players in the best ways. So like the Deebo out of the backfield, like, so you use my lesson, like whatever, like Andrew pessimistic way you want to, right? Say Andrew hates running backs. Okay. That's Andrew's lesson, right? But like coaches using the Deebos out of the backfield, Waddle out of the backfield. I think that we saw a little bit out of Chase too this weekend. Even everyone's favorite LaVisca, was getting that stuff too. So good. And again, I'm not saying Urban Meyer's a good coach, but good coaches finding, productive ways to use their best playmakers. Hard to identify. Like, look, admittedly, hard to identify who could have known.
But Andrew, just to add to that, because I don't want you to go to another point. If we look at Skywalker, our buddy Skywalker, back-to-back 6-digit winner, and I brought this up on the show that I heard him talk about on their show, First and 15. First and 15, first and 5th.
First and 15.
And he talked about, like, when you hear a coach talk about players that he's scheming around, that they're scheming their offense around, and Deebo's a perfect example of that. We're seeing that with guys like Waddle. Like, those are the guys you want to grab. Cup. Like, the offense is going to be around those guys. Is that what you're talking about, Andrew?
Look, absolutely. That's it. I think, again, like the struggle here, right? And like, because you got to parse, what's good information versus bad information, because then you're going to get coach speak. So like, I'm not saying totally rely on the coach stuff, but like,
good point.
You see these opportunities where they're actually doing it, right? So like, playoff challenge is not to plug that right now, but like to look at coaches using their good players in good ways, start to think about that now, because the coaches in the playoffs will start to tip their hand about what they think of their best players. So we're going to get a good opportunity to see, do they think they have a hidden playmaker where they like something out of that to maybe where we can spin that forward for next year. So, a Debo, look, I think that's tough to see just how well they were going to use and put their best player in the most productive of ways. But I think, Theo, you can't be kicking yourself, because I think a lot of coaches kind of did that. And I certainly didn't anticipate Waddle out of the backfield, Chase out of the backfield. And my guess is longer seasons, more running back injuries. Again, I think we may be able to see that a little bit more of these short passes coming out of the backfield for these good playmakers.
Yeah, that's a very good, very legit point there, Andrew.
Yeah, so JD, why don't you go, and then I'll jump in.
So we talk about all the guests we've had. One thing that stuck out to me recently, I think it was Kyle Hillisheim. I knew I was going to mess up his name. Is that how you say
you got
it?
it perfect.
And he talked about something that really stood out to me, because I felt like that was maybe one of my mistakes this season. And it's, you get to and even again, I look at the teams that I won with, especially best ball, a lot of them I drafted early. One was like the end of January that I drafted, and I won. And I think that you get towards the back end of the off season. I think we've all done this, where you've drafted so many teams and you have your head like, oh, I've got so many shares of this guy or so many shares of that guy. And whether that's Cooper Kupp or Deebo Samuel or any one of these guys we're talking about, and maybe you start shying away and maybe not focusing so much on player ownership. I think one season I went completely polarized one end, and I just went all in on guys that I wanted, and guys like Jordan Reed just kind of burned me. And that kind of brought me back to like, let's always pay attention to player ownership. But I think there's a fine line there. And for me, it's, draft the guys that you believe in. And when you get towards the back end of the offseason, try not to focus too much, because what happens is you pull away from the opportunity to grab some of these guys that you really like. And I know he mentioned like a guy like Cooper Kupp and Deebo Samuels for himself, whereas you think, oh, I've got so many of these guys already, I'm gonna go elsewhere, and you're not optimally drafting at that point. You're not taking the best player, the best option at that point, because you're trying to balance this ownership. So I think I'm gonna maybe focus a bit more on that, pulling away, because I'm not putting in 200, 300, 400 teams when it comes to best ball. So maybe I don't necessarily focus on that at certain percentages. What do you guys think about that?
No, I think it's something Chad Schrader has said as well. Getting too worried about what your percentage of exposure to a guy is, that's can sometimes lead you to galaxy braining. I think that the one time you really want to start trying to do that is maybe with first round exposure. I don't want to be all in on the same guy every single first round pick, just because.
Or like in one specific tournament, right? Or like one specific format.
Yeah.
Or
bingo. We talked about that before. Like one specific tournament where if it was in the main event and you had 45% exposure to one guy, maybe you want to cool it back if you're doing several main event entries. But a lot of people have said this. I think that's one thing that became something the very high volume players tracked, and I think it kind of trickled down. But I think that most of the time it just kind of galaxy brains you, have conviction, take the guys you want, and if it means you're heavier on one guy than another, then so be it.
Yeah, I agree. So
my biggest lesson learned, and I know I've said it before already, but I'll say it again. I too am traumatized by missing out on Deebo. Hi, my name is Dan, and I missed out on Deebo. Anyway, but the reason why I missed out on Deebo was more structural. Where Deebo was going, I was always looking at like tight end, running back, quarterback, because I had already nailed down a bunch of wide receivers. I wasn't really in the market for a wide receiver right there. I was always taking one of those other positions. So, that kind of caused me to, not have as many shots at Debo. It's not to say I never took a wide receiver in the range where he was going, but it was just not often enough. So, I need to make sure that I'm varying up my structure a little bit more across different leagues so I can give myself access to all the players where they happen to be drafted. And there are certain players, that will, through the course of a draft season, from, sad to say, January through August, they'll drift up and they'll drift down, and they'll drift in and out of a range. And so you get access to them that way. But some of them kind of tend to stay a little bit more tight focused. Debo was one of those. He just never really got higher than the 7th round. He never went lower than like the 9th round. So, that was just kind of where you had to get him. And if you weren't looking there, you weren't going to get him. And then I'll just jump into, one thing you're going to keep doing more of in 2022. I'll start the round on that since I'm already going. And for me, that's taking the players that Twitter hates, especially in the mid rounds. It's just, everybody's focused on having that draft that, you post it on Twitter and everybody oohs and ahs over it. Oh, that's so great. All the hot, sexy players, all that kind of stuff. You know what? The Leonard Fournettes, the James Conner, guys like that, every time they were showing up all summer long in a draft, everybody's like, I don't really like your, running back 3 or running back 4 or whatever it is. Yeah, but how much are you expecting out of them? These are guys that are in situations where they have a chance. It's a very murky situation. The reason why they're down where they are is because they're not guaranteed of anything. But when you're in that range in the mid rounds of the draft, you have to look at what is possible here, rather than what does Twitter want to have happen? It's like what might happen. These players are still players. They're still getting coached by an NFL coach. Twitter has like zero effect on how they're going to perform. And we all act like, well, if I take this guy, I'm going to get roasted on Twitter. Like Andrew was talking about earlier, his Revelations League draft got roasted, and he ended up winning it. And that's just the thing. I mean, you just can't be afraid of what Twitter's going to say, especially in those mid rounds. You got to grab guys who think they're going to have a chance and see what can happen.
I think that's a great call by Dan. And I think just to piggyback on what Dan was saying is oftentimes a lot of the players you're talking about might go like 7th round, 8th round, 9th round, where they might be unpopular picks, but the hit rates for those round guys, you'll see a lot of guys flame out over those particular rounds. So I think that Dan was very smart this year with especially like a guy like Leonard Fournette, who was a very unpopular guy in the preseason, and Dan was collecting shares of him. I think that's just a great call. Sometimes the guys that are a little more unpopular, yet they're still in that range, might be the safer pick and potentially have a little more upside as well. So I love that call, Dan.
Yeah, there's this little downside, right?
Yeah,
because you can take Fournette in some drafts, you can take Ronald Jones in some drafts. You can straddle the line. You can take Zach Moss, you can take Devin Singletary. Straddle the line. Take some places, take others the other places.
But look at the guys you mentioned, Dan, and this will be my next point, and this is why I think I did well in this area with regards to the zero RB, the hero RB targets. Take the ones that are on good offenses and behind good offensive lines, and I think it's a no-brainer. You guys talked about guys I owned: Leonard Fournette, James Conner, Damian Harris, AJ Dillon, Elijah Mitchell. These are all in offenses that have shown production at the position. They're behind good offensive lines, and they're all. You look at Tampa Bay, number 2 in scoring, Arizona, number 11, New England, number 8, Green Bay, number 11, and Elijah Moore on San Francisco, 13th, all in points scored as offenses. So I think, you got to build your structures right, but you got to focus and target the right players on the right teams as well in certain positions. And I think that that's important as well. Especially at the running back position when you're looking at offensive lines and how often these teams score.
For me, the thing that I'm going to continue doing, this past summer, I tweeted out something that I believe that rookie wide receivers are the most mispriced asset in redraft. And it's the last 3 years have just been super productive for rookies. Yet you still see players going a little later than what they beat in terms of ADP. So I think that investing in rookie wide receivers is absolutely something I'm going to continue doing. I expect that the market's going to correct itself. But if you just look at this season, Jamar Chase absolutely smashes his ADP. Jalen Waddle absolutely smashes his ADP. Devonta Smith averaged about 12 points a game, which where he was being drafted, he basically about hit it. Amon-Ra St. Brown absolutely crushed it as a rookie wide receiver. Elijah Moore, if you look at his splits, if you would have simply just, points per game doesn't really, show how effective Moore was. He gave you about a 5-game run. Then you look at last year, Justin Jefferson, obviously, top 6 wide receiver. Chase Claypool, T. Higgins, Brandon Ayuk, and CeeDee Lamb was about hit his ADP. I wouldn't say he was a complete smash. And then we go back another season. A.J. Brown crushes his ADP. Deebo Samuel crushes his ADP. DK Metcalf crushes his ADP. And then Terry McLaurin and Darius Slayton were both very helpful fantasy players, and they were undrafted. I think McLaurin, he would go in the 20th round, 19th round, a couple of these NFFC drafts. But for whatever reason, the market hasn't caught up to the fact that players are more ready to contribute to NFL rosters from day one as rookie wide receivers than they were, even 5-6 years ago. So you're seeing it every single season. You're seeing big turnover in the top 36 wide receivers, and a lot of that is because of the rookie wide receiver. So I'm going to continue to look to get these rookie wide receivers. I think they're extremely mispriced, and that's one thing that I think a lot of fantasy players really need to dive into. Everyone wants that rookie running back. The rookie running back is not a hard thing to get people to draft, but rookie wide receivers, you're still seeing some players that just don't want them. And I think that's one thing I'm going to continue to hit.
Yeah,
I made a meme. Can you post my meme, somebody?
Wait, yes.
Thank you. This is me in 2022. I am going to make disgusting looking draft boards. So the thing is, and just to say lesson learned, let's just have a quick divergence here. Say something nice about the FFPC. I love the main event, love the playoff challenge, love a dynasty, love a lot of things. I hate the football guys. Theo, we had great content with the football guys. The level of effort of doing the waivers with those football guys with my return on investment is so miserable. I cannot even tell you. Having said that, I did win a couple credits, so I'm going to do a few teams. And I've already resolved myself with this meme, which for those of you who are going to listen to the podcast, it's the guy with the 2 buttons sweating and says draft another wide receiver or make a stupid draft board with another wide receiver. I'm going to make sickening looking teams with my free FF, with my football guys credits. I'm going to do hero wide receiver so hard it will make everyone's eyes bleed. Anyways, on a serious note, I think I agree with everything Theo said. Rookie wide receivers. I think second-year wide receivers. I thought this was a good draft strategy going into it. Again, wasn't like a full and total zealot about it, but I do think that there's really productive ways to draft wide receivers and have winning football teams. And so I just think that the pool of people doing that is still going to be light. My guess is it will be more than this year, just given kind of where we see and kind of where maybe that final team ended up and looking at the here running back. But yeah, so what I will do differently this year is play more main events and less football guys. But for the football guys that I do, I will draft so many wide receivers. It's not funny.
Yeah, and I think one point on that is as we were looking through those top teams, some of those teams that I didn't really classify as zero RB, I think possibly their owners thought they were doing zero RB. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
just not quite
Correct.
completely understanding the strategy, how if you're going to do it, this is how you do it. And, but again, it's, I know Andrew will find a way to force it in there and make it work, but
No. No, because I mean, my most of them, you brought it up earlier.
I mean, I think
teams. I mean that Revelations team, right? That was Eckler led. The auction team that flamed out, right? There was a purposeful strategy to do DeAndre Swift and have him lead the team and structure around wide. I mean, like I had some really, and I think some of the other main event teams that we all did were really well structured around the right running back. So, like I said, I'm not a total zealot. It's just I think that going back on it is like, boy, I talk about the disappointment and the trauma of Debo. Like I really should have been, for the structures that I was building, I should have been more on those Cup and Debo guys. So I'm not gonna lament that so much.
Were you more on Bobby Wood and Ayuk? Is that why, or you just completely missed that?
No. I wasn't on trees. I was on Ayuk, but was getting him late. Like was getting him probably a little bit later. But I guess 4th round. Nevertheless, maybe I did miss with the Ayuk one, which I still believe in. And by the way, he cost me a free main event team.
I feel like San Fran just fucked a lot of people. Think about how many, and it's funny because I was looking, one of my teams, I actually drafted Lance, but because I drafted Heineke later on, like in my second last or whatever round, it kind of made up. And I had basically Tua and Heineke going for that team, and it took me, it won me that league. But I feel like the 49ers screwed a lot of teams this year in one way or the other.
Yeah.
Yeah. As we're doing all this, I mean, I think the thing to keep in mind is, the past kind of looks inevitable when we look at it through the lens of the present.
Yeah.
So, it's really easy to look back and that was, it was so obvious. I should have seen that. Well, obviously we didn't. Obviously, a lot of people didn't. Some of the teams that drafted Cup probably just lucked into him. Others of them maybe went after him intentionally. There's a lot of ways to get there, and when you have a winning team, if you look at it honestly, of who you took where and why you took them there. Some of those players that ended up carrying your team probably got on your team more by just luck than anything. They were. You had 3 players in your queue that all disappeared within the 6 picks before yours, and you're forced to. I got to take a guy. I'm going to take this guy, and all of a sudden you look like a genius. So it's always good to look back with humility and try to remember where your head was at when you were making those picks, and understand that's going to have some effect as well.
Agreed. Let's talk specific, guys. Theo, you looking at guys that whether you own them already or not, who's someone that you're trying to add? I found this one hard to answer because I just started listening to a bunch of guys that I wish I had more of. So why don't you start this off? I'll go last. Whoever you guys don't mention, I'll throw in there.
Well, I think for Dynasty, one guy that I'll be trying to look to add shares of is Stefan Diggs. Where I think that if you look now, Stefan Diggs is like wide receiver 7, but he didn't quite smash in the way that it didn't feel like it. But he's going to. He didn't
have those ceiling weeks. I have a lot of Diggs in Dynasty. He didn't have those ceiling weeks this year.
To me, he just becomes a little bit more affordable. It'll be year 3 of him with Josh Allen and him together. He would have cost a lot more last summer than he would this offseason.
How old is Diggs right now? Do you guys know?
27,
20
or 28?
28, no?
Yeah.
28, 27. I believe he's still gonna have he's still got gas in the tank. He was healthy this season. Preseason we heard he was dealing with some things, and then he stayed relatively healthy throughout the season. So I just think, to me, Stefan Diggs is kind of like a post-hype guy that you're able to add. And I think the dynasty is a funny thing. Once you get these wide receivers that are like past age 27, people are willing to trade them. And I think if you've got a contender, I think Stefan Diggs is a really good player to try to trade for. He could easily smash like he did 2 seasons ago. And at the end of the day, I think that Josh Allen keeps looking better and better, and Stefan Diggs is the alpha there. I think that year 3 in Buffalo for him could be a real steal when it comes to redraft. And I think he's cheaper now in Dynasty. He's the guy I'm going to look into trying to get.
So send your DK Metcalf for Diggs plus is what you're saying.
No, I wouldn't do that. But I think that like to put it in perspective, like I had an FFPC 500 last year where I traded 2 first-round picks for like 2 mid first-round picks for Devonta Adams in the 3rd. And I think that like won't have to spend that much to get Stefan Diggs. Like I think that you can get Diggs for, somebody might be willing to trade him for the 1.04 plus something else. Where if I'm a contender, I'm really gonna try to go after and make that sort of a deal. I just think that it's a perfect opportunity for a guy that didn't quite smash, but he still hasn't shown any signs of slippage. And I think you have a quarterback that continues to get better and an offense that we all like. So that's the kind of guy that I'm going to look to get this year for my contending teams.
I was making the meme, Theo. So if you were saying this during the rookie wide receivers, I apologize. Do you have a good buy window on Rashad Bateman now?
Yeah.
Did I steal your thing?
That's a really
No.
I
Rashad Bateman, that's
didn't
a
even think of that. I love
call.
that. Yeah, I love that.
Great call.
Yes. Okay. Good. I was giving you some meme building time credit there, Theo. No, I mean, I think he's a great one because I think that I really believe in his talent, and I think in the chat, Wheeler and a couple other people were mentioning, the disappointments of I think Terrace Marshall to a huge extent, Rondale Moore, at least from my perspective, and kind of what he did to my teams. Wasn't quite that explosive guy that I wanted. Bateman started the year injured. I think he flashed a little bit. And I think the beauty of his buy window, too, is he's not going to make the playoffs. It's very unlikely the Ravens will make the playoffs. I think it requires my Jaguars to beat the Colts for that to happen. So might as well put a nail in that coffin. So I think you're going to get a really interesting window on Bateman. And I would, if you can, you get a good price for him, I would go after him this offseason.
I love that one.
Mm-hmm. And anyone who's not going to flash during the playoffs and kind of kill the value aspect of it. And I think about a guy like Akers. I'm like, I don't even want Akers to come back because I want to be buying him all off season, Yeah. But I love the Bateman call. Love that.
Yeah. A couple others I'll throw out there. Cortland Sutton, definitely one. Give the man a quarterback and another year removed from his ACL. And I think there's, I think he's going to come cheap, and I think he's got a good chance. I wasn't real big on Allen Robinson this year. I think I'm going to be bigger on him this.
My God, he's
in 2022
for nothing.
I think he's going to probably be down there in the Odell Beckham range where he's like 7th, 8th round.
You talk about guys who have done it and their value have dropped. That's
right.
A big example right there.
So those are a couple guys. Jerry Jeudy almost kind of fits in the same thing as Cortland Sutton. Give the guy a quarterback. Chase Claypool, another one. I love what he brings to the table. I just, if somebody besides Roethlisberger is quarterbacking for Pittsburgh, I think it's probably going to help him out. So even Michael Pittman, another one. He did all right, but he didn't win anybody any leagues or anything like that. So Christian Kirk going to be a free agent. So there's quite a few wide receivers.
I'm already looking forward to Theo and I's debates mid-drafts about him wanting to draft Christian Kirk in like the 9th round and he's just vomiting all over my keyboard.
Well, the problem will come because, Shelley, you won't have drafted a running back yet, and you're still wanting to draft Kirk.
Yeah, true.
So.
Those football guys' draft boards, I promise you, are going to look disgusting when I post them. It's going to be wonderful.
Well, I'm just glad that Andrew loves Jonathan Taylor, so it won't be hard to if we get 1.01. It's not going to be like
go JT and then like 20 receivers.
Yeah, right. He'll take JT at the 1.01.
Nice.
1.02.
Yeah, no, it's true. I would absolutely.
So as usual, I made the mistake of going after Dan, and that's usually it could be a mistake or actually a good move because I don't have to talk about him. But Pittman and Claypool were definitely on there. Juju's another guy. Juju's in my out of sight, out of mind list. Him and J.K. Dobbins for me are
Yes.
two buys that are kind of out of sight, out of mind. These RBs that we talked about, guys, the ones, all of them that were those, zero or hero RB running backs this year. I think you can still get him at a value. Elijah Mitchell, a lot of people are thinking, oh, he's like James Robinson. Like he had that one season and his value is going to drop. And, I don't know about you guys, but I think Elijah Mitchell's kind of, he's carved out a nice role out there in an offense that likes to run the ball. And I think you can probably still get him at a value. The Pittsburgh receivers, Dan, you talked about Pittman. I love that as a buy, especially with the uncertainty at quarterback. Schultz in Dallas in tight end premium is a guy I think that as much as he overproduced, and he's someone that I didn't have enough of, I think, this season in tight end premium, I think you can probably still buy him at a good value. Probably buy him for a better price than what he's actually producing. And that's pretty much it. I mean, wish list type of thing with the FOMO, the rookie FOMO. I'd have to put Jamar Chase. I only have one share.
Good luck, JD.
I know, but that's why I put him. That's why I put him on there. And the other guy was Jalen Waddle. I've got one share of, and those are two guys I wish I had more of. But you guys, you got to think they're like stocks, right? The values will drop eventually. Some narrative is going to come out, or some headlines going to come out this offseason when people are bored. And just like JT last offseason, you'll have an opportunity to buy some of these guys. So just make sure you're paying attention. Guys, you're completely out of. I mean, I'll go first. I mean, for me, guys like Kenny G, definitely completely out of. I'll just drop him at this point if I didn't already. And Amari Cooper is a guy that I probably held on to more than I should have, but especially with Gallup getting hurt and less of a chance of him moving, I don't know, Dan, I know you're more in the contract situation, so you might shed a bit more light on this, but I just don't want any more Amari Cooper, man. The inconsistency and the injuries, it's just not worth it for me.
Yeah, it depends on where he falls in the draft. I mean, I can see myself drafting Cooper if he's cheaper, but if he's going to be up there in the fourth round, I'm going to have a hard time pulling the trigger on that.
Where are you guys on CeeDee Lamb? Like, I feel like Dan, you and I, we made big moves for him just because we're talking about Dallas before we move on to your guys that you're completely out of. Is CeeDee Lamb worth his value, or do you think he's a good sell, or do you think he's a good buy? What do you guys think on CeeDee Lamb? I'm curious.
I'm in, and I'm buying. Although I did say to my wife, how on earth can Dallas look so good in some of these weeks and just completely fucking inept in others? It's like unreal watching their Jekyll and Hyde. Like you're getting good Dak or bad Dak, or good performances bad. It's like unreal. So for like CeeDee Lamb to be sitting on one catch for 9 yards for most of the game this past weekend was just beyond tilting, especially when I needed him to come through in a big way. But having said that, I really believe in Lamb's talent, and so I'm still buying if his price dips.
Dan, you think it improves in 2022 for Lamb?
I mean, really, what's the problem with CeeDee Lamb? The problem is that weeks 11 through 17, he didn't have any smash weeks. If you look at what he did weeks 1 through 10 versus 11 through 17, 1 through 10, he was smashing on a regular basis. 11 through 17, he had some okay weeks, but nothing really huge. And that's just part of the natural variance of a wide receiver. If people are going to discount Lamb because he had, 7 okay weeks in a row or bad to okay weeks in a row, but they don't even want to look at the first 10 weeks, great. That's fantastic. I'll be here for you. If you're looking to unload Lamb because you don't like him, send him to me.
Yeah, I'm totally with Dan on that. I think that it's people get such nitpicking. He's a fantastic talent. If you have an opportunity to get CeeDee Lamb, especially on a dynasty team, you're going to be using him for years and years to come. And I think that the fact that we haven't seen his best football. I think like him being wide receiver 1 overall next season is in the range of outcomes. I don't put that out of there. So for me, I think that people are a little disappointed. Certainly, if you needed points from him last week, it wasn't great. But I think that we have seen him smash. I mean, you can just pop the tape in. The guy's got unbelievable talent. And he's in a situation where we like his quarterback enough, and we like we like his offensive coordinator enough. So he's the kind of guy that if your league mate wants to get rid of him, by all means, I would trade for him. I would trade 2 first-round picks.
Go buy him now because Gallup's hurt, right? So if he goes off in the playoffs, you ain't buying Lamb this offseason. He's up there with Chase.
Yeah, and shout out to Dave again with some good stuff in the chat room. But Lamb is a top 5 dynasty wide receiver. If somebody in your league doesn't see him as such, that's fine. Top 3, we could have a conversation. After Jamar Chase,
I'm trying to create a buy opportunity for Fantasyland. That's all I'm trying to do, Theo. I'm just here to help the people.
Yeah, if you're selling Lamb for 2 firsts, I'm buying.
Yeah, that's it. Like
easy
2 firsts, 100% 2 firsts. And I think that you could talk yourself into more than that. And he's the kind of player that helps you win next season and win for many years to come. And it's just don't trade CeeDee Lamb in Dynasty. It's just bad process. Unless you're going to get a Justin Jefferson or a Jamar Chase or a really, really great, young wide receiver or a combination of a couple of guys. I mean, if it's a huge, huge package of younger players, maybe think about it. But it's just galaxy braining.
And that's why I bring it up.
Galaxy braining.
That's why I bring it up. Like Toronto Dave's talking about, he was thinking about trading Lamb. I'm sure a lot of people who invested, I know Dan and I, we made some big moves in these 500 leagues we talked about to invest in Lamb, and he didn't produce for us in the playoffs. So to me, I see that, and I think there must be a lot of people holding Lamb that didn't get what they wanted in the playoffs, and like Dave or other, they're looking to maybe sell, 3/4 on the dollar type of deal. And for me, that's like, go buy him, right? Anyone that you consider in those top rankings in your dynasty, make your own rankings, make your top 10, your top 24 at each position. So every time you see a dip in value for one of those guys, just buy him, guys. That's all it is. Just an opportunity to buy.
Yep.
All right. We're going to do playoff challenge next week, guys, or maybe next episode next week. We'll let you guys know, but we did $1. What are we at? $1.30 right now. We did 90 minutes looking back on 2021, talking about, Dan brought some serious stats on some of those winning rosters, winning builds in those big tournaments on the FFPC. Shout out to Darren and Fantasy Mojo. Guys, go check that site out for all your data with the big money tournaments. But let's end this off with a veteran that each of us are looking to maybe offload this offseason. We all know, I was about to say we all know like the veterans are better to offload during the season, but if there's an opportunity to sell some of these guys this offseason, maybe we go around and help you guys out. Hopefully you've gotten a lot out of this tonight. Make sure you let us know if there's any guests that we haven't hit on or that you want back on the show. Make sure you let us know any topics you want to hit on this offseason. Andrew, I'll go to you first, brother. Who's someone veteran? I mean, we can define that in many ways. So how do you approach that? And who's someone that maybe you're looking to offload this offseason?
Yeah, preview, because I'm going to talk about this again next week for the playoff challenge. But looking at the playoff teams, it's going to be disgusting thinking about which tight end you're going to slot in there for the playoff challenge in terms of which teams are making. I think it's going to be like the Kelseys, and then the guy I want to talk about here is Kittle. I'm hoping for a huge Kittle playoff so that way I can offload him in the offseason if I can. This is one of those situations where, like, again, do as I say, not as I do. I wish I'd offloaded him this past year, but I thought his price was a little depressed coming off of an injury season. I'm looking for huge Kittle spikes just to try to recoup some value, because I think I'm not saying he's injury prone, but I think questions in San Francisco. What does Lance look like? Kittle health concerns. I think if I can get good value for Kittle, he's absolutely somebody that I want to offload if I can this offseason. So looking for huge playoffs from him.
Guys, check out Andrew at AMS Schellenberg. He's going to be bringing a ton of goodness, a ton of live drafts with, especially with Theo with regards to the Millie Billies. Like he talked about, he brought in the Ship Chasers last week or last year, and he's going to bring in a bunch more of some awesome guests. Whether it's to do a live draft with you guys or just talk about strategies. But check out Andrew at AMS Schellenberg. Always a blast having you on, brother. We'll have you on more regularly. Moving on, Theo, who's someone veteran-wise that you're looking to maybe offload?
So I think that a lot of guys might get really obvious as dynasty sells. They hit a certain age, you want to unload them. But one guy that I really love as a talent, and I'm not out on in redraft, but in dynasty, I'm going to be looking to try to trade Nick Chubb. I traded Nick Chubb a few places this year. One was a rebuild, and one was to get Tyreek Hill. It was a package for Tyreek Hill. But I just think that Kevin Stefanski might be a fake sharp. I think that Stefanski I liked more last year than this year. And I think that there's a somewhat of a limiting factor with Chubb in the fact that Stefanski seems to want to mix in a second running back. We saw it last night with Dearness Johnson, so maybe this is just a little, recency bias for me. But I think that Nick Chubb is 26 years old. I think certain people absolutely love Nick Chubb as a player, and for good reason. He's one of the best pure running backs in football, in terms of actually running the football. But I think in terms of dynasty value, I think this is the offseason to trade him. I think a year from now, his value will not be as high. Even if you go by age, he'll be a year older. And I think that you're just not going to see that smash season with Stefanski. I think he's more of a purgatory type guy where he'll be potentially an RB1, but a back half one. I don't see him as a league winner. And I think he's the kind of guy you could cash out for now, because I don't think he's going to get that running back 1, 2, 3 type season that we were kind of hopeful for with him and Stefanski.
He's the OG fantasy, a must follow out there in Twitter sphere. He writes the waiver wire article for Player Profiler. He's a beast out there in fantasy land, high stakes, multi stakes, all kinds of stakes. Shout out to Johannes Sanchez requesting Jordan McNamara. I know Theo, we talked about, and Dan getting Jordan on very shortly. He's a repeat guest, a friend of the show, and Scott Connor. Theo, write that down. I know you're the guest guy.
No, they have a great podcast. We'd love to have them on, and I'm sure Jake Jordan will be back on. He's been on several times. So yeah, great call, Johannes.
Yeah, shout out to the chat, man. Always bringing the goodness. And actually, Andrew reminding them that they had Scott Connor on the Millie Billies. And guys, check out the channel. If you're new to this channel and you play fantasy and you want to win, you're playing for dollar bills, it's a no-brainer, guys. We talked about a million reasons. Dan, who's your vet? Who's your vet that I know you like the proven guys, but who's someone that maybe you're offloading this offseason?
Yeah, I'm going to go kind of a little bit of a different way. I'm going to talk about a couple wide receivers everybody's pretty hot on that I'm just looking to see what I can get a good price on. And that's Amon-Ra St. Brown and Darnell Mooney. I think both of them are living on volume that may not be sustainable. I mean, neither of them has a lot of draft capital, which we know kind of tends to force teams, doesn't force them, but they don't really commit a lot of times to players that they don't have a lot of draft capital in. And they're looking to replace players that they don't need to replace. I mean, if I was a sharp NFL coach or GM, with both those guys, I'd be like, man, we've got a hit here. Let's keep feeding them. But that's so often what we don't see happen. And, to the point that I'm willing to, you don't want to just take whatever you can get. You want to get a good price. But if you can get a really good price and flip one of them, if you can flip Amon-Ra St. Brown for a low first right now, I'd do that all day. You might even be able to get a little bit more than that. If you can flip Mooney for, a low first, high second, something like that, or maybe flip him for a Chase Claypool in a third, anything like that. Just go ahead and make that deal, because, there's Detroit is a team that's got 5 draft picks in the first 3 rounds. They're going to be looking to add wide receivers. They're going to be looking to add more talent. A lot of Amon-Ra St. Brown's receptions and targets have come while Hawkinson was out, while DeAndre Swift was out. So the volume looks a little bit unsustainable. So, just kind of be looking for opportunities like that where you can say, you know what, because the best time to sell people is when, there's actually an active market for them. And I think there's actually probably a pretty good market for those guys right now. So see what you can get.
Especially after one of those sharp increases in value, right?
Yes.
It's got to come back to the support line, as they say in investing, and that's, you see some fire up like that in value, you take advantage. Dan's right, because there'll be another opportunity to buy him back at a cheaper price, even if you do want him back. So I love that call, Dan, because that's not at all what I was thinking. I'm going to your neck of the woods. Dalvin Cook is a guy that I didn't have any shares of, any running backs, especially at those price points that are over 25 years old. Yes, I am an ageist when it comes to running backs. The Seminoles right there, as Andrew is pumping. Look, he was a rental for me in that $77 FFPC dyno I talked about that I led all season and then, finished second. But I bought him in Madison as a rental to pair up with JT to make a run. But I will probably, if no one in my league is listening to this, try to sell him this offseason. And I think that anyone holding Dalvin should probably do the same, because his value is whether it's this offseason or going into the next season, these running backs over 25 years old that are getting some serious volume, the value will cliff eventually. And just go look up at Todd Gurley for that reference.
Yep.
Sorry, Dan, you look like you had something to say, so I was letting you breathe there.
No, I'm good.
So guys, tons of goodness tonight, 90 minutes, a little review on 2021. Dan shot out some serious stats on some winning rosters, some builds, some players. Hopefully we helped you guys out with some guys you can target this offseason, some guys maybe you can offload to improve your rosters. Hopefully we helped you guys win this season. Let us know out there in Twitter land if you're listening right now. Let us know if we helped you win a ship. Win a league, even if it's a $35 best ball, $5 best ball that you won, a dynasty league, your favorite league, whatever it is, high stakes. Let us know. He's the overhyped sleeper, no E at the end. At the OG Fantasy is Theo, and Andrew at AMS Schellenberg or Shelly.
Either way.
Seminoles in the dark over there. We love having on the show, and we love having you guys tune in. Shout out to the chat, man. The chat was awesome tonight. Wheeler, Kyle, Joe, I know I'm going to miss people. Dave, I shouldn't have started naming them, but you guys were awesome tonight. Come in, guys, tune in live. We will answer your questions as much as possible. So if you have trade questions, whether you're going to the playoffs, lineup questions, anything you have, let us know. That's pretty much it, guys. Good luck if you're doing the playoff challenge. We'll be back with a playoff challenge show later on. We didn't touch on it tonight, so we'll definitely zone in on that. Check out myffpc.com. Make sure you've got an account. You can register for that because it's fun, man. If you didn't do well in your season or you did well in your season, it gives you another opportunity to win some money. And if you win that cake in the playoff challenge and you didn't do well during the season, it don't matter, because at the end of the day, you're playing this to win money, and that's what we're here to do. Guys, we'll check you all later. We appreciate you, and that's all I got for you.
Go district, you know the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text. That trash offer's the best. You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man. Y'all know what to do. It's the and I always be traded. And I always be traded. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them.